you can actually, by changing the ratios of these compounds, focus in on either more stimulating effects and focusing effects, or more sedative effects or calming and blissful effects, by changing the ratios of the antidepressive to anticonvulsant and antipsychotic compounds in there.
So essentially, this touches on the element that if you tune it correctly, people can essentially choose their own moods, per se, and that's what you're saying. Welcome to this episode of the MedTech 101 podcast, and this is the first time we'll talk about a pharmaceutical drug. I know it's taken more than 30 episodes to get to this point in time, and I had promised to talk about that. So today we've got two exciting guests here on the podcast. We've got Nate and we've got Wayne, and these two are basically teaming up together to start something that will be helping a lot of people. But this a particular herb or drug, as you might want to call it, is still essentially new to the Western world, but it's been around in South Africa for a very long time. In fact, going back centuries, being used by certain tribes in South Africa. And that's what made it quite interesting for me, because I grew up in South Africa. I lived in South Africa for about 8 years, and I never knew about this. So this was quite a good learning curve for me as well, preparing for this. And yeah, so without really delaying any further, welcome to the MedTech 101 podcast, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having us, Rodney. It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So yeah, just to give the audience a bit of a quick background, we'll start with you, Nate. I know, Nate, you were like a sort of like a massage therapist in the army. You served some time, and whilst you're serving, you encountered quite a lot of things that you saw there that potentially might have helped you get the motivation to start, Disruptor Labs. But looking at your background, Nate, what would you tell us roughly to the audience, in addition to what I've already said?
Yeah, I can share that I did a 4-year stint in the U.S. military. I served as an infantryman. I did a couple trips to Afghanistan, and part of my time there, I'd been injured, just training accident, right? Nothing crazy. I fell off a hill, but I had this nagging injury that kind of guided me in the direction of pursuing health and well-being all around. And so after getting out of the military, that was what kind of guided my interest in massage therapy or physical therapy. And so I pursued that. And then from there, that world led me into pursuing mental health, and how mental and physical health become intertwined. And in even more recent years, I've had some severe issues with mold toxicity. And so just all of those things kind of combined have been an impactful elements of my journey and just exploration of health and well-being in general, and how these ideas of physical health, mental health, emotional, spiritual well-being, all of those are very much so intertwined.
Nice. That's really nice to hear, and I think it's always good to speak to people who have served in the army, Nate. So thank you, the second person who I've brought on the podcast who has served in the army, and I always find guys who have served time to have a certain sort of like regimen, like way of doing things, and it's quite nice to see how you've been able to connect some of those dots leading up to this point, and. Yeah, so then we'll go to Wayne. Wayne is a medicinal chemist, but Wayne like fought off cancer as well, so you're a cancer survivor, so which is quite amazing. And I personally spent a lot of time, just working on actually just developing a medical device that prevents some side effects of chemotherapy, and so I know what it's like. But yeah, Wayne, what would you want to say to the audience just to let them know about your background leading up to Disruptor Labs?
Thanks for the introduction, Rodney, and thanks as well for your compression device, that cryogenic compression device that prevents peripheral neuropathy. That's a huge thing that comes up during chemotherapy. Certainly arose for me as a chemist in the field, working in graduate school, and also in some internships at some laboratories that weren't, appropriately situated for safety and for prevention of chemical exposure. As you mentioned, I did spend about 2 years in immunosuppressive chemotherapy fighting off not cancer, but something very similar, very severe aplastic anemia, a disease where essentially all of my bone marrow just all at once died. And this process of medical isolation and rebuilding my immune system from scratch, having to balance immunosuppressive chemotherapy, daily injectable experimental pharmaceuticals, hours of magnesium infusions to counterbalance what was going on, really focused my attention on the importance of integrative health, like Nate mentioned, the balance between mood, behavior, diet that makes a person have well-being. And this brought me, after 2 years of recovery and a bone marrow transplant, to working for the first medical cannabis company in the world, based out of Israel, Tikkun Olam, as they were expanding into the USA. And pretty shortly afterwards, within a couple of years, I had founded my own consulting company to expand my reach. Since then, the company has been consulting all over the world, but really the focus that I found as psychedelics and cannabis were maturing as an industry, where there were these huge gaps in the way that these industries were able to impact the public. And a lot of those gaps come down to accessibility. And we'll get more into that later, but that's basically been my story, as a medicinal chemist informed by a health challenge, who's now attempting to bring some insight and some support to the world.
Nice. That's really nice to hear, because one thing you say there sounds like a sort of like a holistic approach to medicine, which is something that has sort of become like a foregone story. And people tend to treat things in isolation right now. But what you're basically saying is, trying to treat the whole body as a one whole system instead. And it's like going back in time, is it? Because now modern medicine isn't really holistic medicine, is it? So that's quite nice. And today, like, I'm quite excited to talk about Kanna, which is the herb or the psychedelic, which we're going to be talking about today, because this herb has existed for thousands and thousands of years. I wonder, why exactly is it not popular? But before we even get to Kanna, like, what made you guys decide to start Disruptor Labs? Because I know you're a new startup right now, and how big are you guys? What are your plans, and what was the motivation behind starting the lab?
Sure. I mean, that goes back to how Nate and I first met. We actually came together in 2017, after beginning specialization in our individual fields, working on an art project. There was a friend of ours in the Bay, where we were living at the time in California, that was building a custom designed pair of 1,000,000-volt Tesla coils that were musical to the world, 35 feet tall. And
Yes.
our devotion to that project, volunteering our time, is what brought us together. You may be familiar with who I'm speaking
Yes.
about.
Sorry.
I can see a
Yeah.
look of familiarity on your face. Yeah, immediate
Yeah,
recognition.
Tori Smith, guys. For those guys who are listening on the podcast right now, they're basically talking about the CEO of Indiatics. I had these guys a couple of weeks ago. Just I think I released the episode a couple of weeks ago, and there was also the connection link, between. They recommended you guys to come on the podcast, so I'm really grateful for that, and I'm happy to hear that. So yeah, no, that's good. It's good to hear that there's something special about Silicon Valley. It's like someone knows someone, and everyone is trying to build something. So I'm probably living in the wrong part of the world. I need to move to California at some point.
Hey, I think you're exactly where you need to be, and so are we. Thanks for so much for having us on the podcast. It's an honor. But you're certainly right. That motivation to build something special together is really what binds, in my life, the best relationships to my life, and that's how Nate and I met. A few years later, we've been specializing in our individual fields, and we synced back up at a few different industry conferences for alternative healing, and just got down to discussing what we've learned, since we first met each other. And that's where the idea for Disruptor Labs came from. The opportunity that we see in presenting education on holistic health options to the world, while at the same time presenting a product, which, by the way, we're not making any medical claims. This is a supplement product. I have to be very clear on that. But as you're discussing with, Kanna's potential medicinally and the over 40 years of clinical research on some of these ingredients, there's a lot of promise that we're very excited about.
Nice. And no, that's really good. And just a quick question then. Then I mean, with you guys having started, the two of you right now, do you guys have like plants somewhere else, or do you have labs that you're actually working to extract this? And if for people listening right now, what would you say? Where are your labs located? What markets are you guys in so far, etc.?
Sure. I mean, we're in really early stages right now. We have
Yep.
formulation set up. We have manufacturing set up. We are just sort of premiering here.
Nice.
There's a lot of different options for Kanna on the market, but the quality and the reciprocity and the framework of integration for the product that we're offering, we believe is going to offer individuals who are either naive to the process of using psychoactives or very familiar the best chance at getting the best benefit out of it. There's a big emphasis on psychoactivity just as a general focus, but these peak state experiences that are super inspirational, as Nate always says, are the lightning strike that illuminates the path on the mountain. The path still needs to be walked, and walking that path with consistency takes an integrative process, not just a psychoactive, but behaviors, community, and support.
Nice. And that's
Could I
really
just
good.
throw in a quick little
Of course. Yeah.
addition to that with the terms psychoactive and psychedelic? Whereas a psychedelic is something that can alter our perception, and that's when we start to get into the realm of hallucinogens, whereas a psychoactive is something that can modulate our experience. So, for example, like coffee is, or caffeine rather, is psychoactive. And so similarly, Kanna is psychoactive. It is not by any means psychedelic.
True. And also one thing to add there, it's also not a hallucinogenic as well, because some people confuse what's a tongue twister. Some people confuse what a hallucinogenic is and what a sort of like a psychedelic is. So I don't know if you guys also want to expand on those people listening right now, so they also know the difference, that to know that Kanna is not a hallucinogenic.
Exactly. Yeah. We just wanted to make it very clear that we're not talking
Yes.
about using hallucinogenics and psychedelics on a daily basis. That's just a different conversation. And so Kanna is mildly psychoactive. And so if somebody were to take Kanna looking for that psychedelic experience, they would probably be severely disappointed. If that's what you want, there's other places to go for that. That's just not what we have here.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the interesting thing, though, there is, the subtleties between psychoactivity and psychedelia, right? When we're talking about, like, what receptor systems each of these compounds interact with, Kanna, mesombrine, mesoprenone, delta-7, mesoprenone, all of these compounds focus in on anti-inflammatory effects, antioxidant effects, and affects serotonin. These are really similar to what we see in both antidepressants and in psychedelics. They affect different types of serotonin receptors, but in general, the ability to affect serotonin is going to have some impact, very likely, on mood, on cognition, and even on digestion and on heart function and immune function. There's a beautiful sort of balance, I feel, especially for individuals who are naive or refractory, maybe avoiding a peak state experience, to get access to some sample of psychoactivity that's also beneficial for their physical health without having to spend 8 hours or multiple weeks integrating, or have a very severe or challenging experience. So it's a unique opportunity for, as we were saying, both seasoned psychedelic users and people who are completely naive to using psychedelics to experience something wholesome and support their wellness.
Thank you very much for getting the basic definitions out of the way, because for people out there, probably getting any chances of confusion is probably reduced now. Because part of this podcast is to try to introduce sort of like these new technologies, this new technology or new pharmaceutical agents or ingredients or drugs that are new on the market, and also ones that are starting to be popular to the general audience in a comprehensive way. So, and then leading on to exactly what we're actually talking about, this plant, kind of like what exactly is Kanna? Or how would you guys describe the plants to people listening?
A succulent. Yeah, we describe it as a succulent. Sceletium tortuosum, if I'm not butchering that name, is the technical species name. There's a lot of different subtypes, as far as I'm aware. Grows wild in southern Africa, and as you said, it has been used very likely for thousands, if not tens of thousands of years, like since we can basically trace back recorded history. The first recorded use of it was, I believe, around 400 years ago through explorers in the area. But culturally, this is an extremely significant plant. What's interesting about Kanna is, I think, very similar to cannabis. There's a huge range of molecules that are expressed depending on the type of Kanna that you get. There's a very different profile of active compounds that may be within it. Kanna, as you know, we've been discussing, it's not a new plant, and it's been around for a while, and even the trade of Kanna and the extraction of Kanna is not a new trade necessarily. Zembrin, which is a commercial extract that's pharmaceutically available in South Africa, is a Kanna extract, which is prescribed for antidepressive and anxiolytic properties to fight anxiety and stress. But what's interesting about just trying to find the plant wild is, without determining what's in it with those compounds, we can't really determine its effect. So if we're going to create a Kanna product, lab testing, determining exactly what compounds are in there and which ratios, are going to be central to being able to say, hey, this Kanna is going to feel this way, and this Kanna extract is going to feel another way.
True. Now that's interesting you say that, because I understand, as I understood, it's been used by the Khoisan tribes, actually, particularly in who live in the southern part of Africa, close to where I'm from, and where I grew up. And I think it's quite interesting because these people, or these tribes, use it for quite a lot of stuff. And when I was doing pre research leading up to this, I also found out they use it for, even when a baby is crying, to help a baby go to sleep, and everything. So it's like it's quite integral to them, and they live in this harsh environment. For people who don't know, they live in the nomads, who live in, it's like harsh climates where there's very little rainfall, and they've been able to live there for thousands of years, where other tribes normally would have struggled to live there. So, and then you mentioned something quite interesting, because in Kana there's alkaloids, but like alkaloids, what what makes people feel good, right? If I'm wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, Nate. But well, how would you describe like the alkaloid ingredients which you were speaking about right now, which are the key active ingredients, such as mesembrane and mesmembranone? And I know all these words. Like, how would you basically break it down for us, to say what exactly are all these alkaloids, and what do they do to us, and why do people seek them when you
Sure.
processing it? Yeah,
Yeah. By the way, Rodney, thank you for bringing up obviously the Khoisan people.
yeah.
But more on the integration of respecting the roots of this plant in a moment. But to answer your question, mesembrine is the compound that is focused on for its antidepressive potential. Delta 7 mesembrinone is more of an antipsychotic. And I believe that mesembrinone is used for its anticonvulsive potential as well. The combination of these compounds together in different ratios creates different effects. So there's interesting, differences between a compound that is, or rather an extract that only contains mesembrine versus an extract that contains ratios of mesembrine to delta 7 to mesembrinone. You can actually, by changing the ratios of these compounds, focus in on either more stimulating effects and focusing effects, or more sedative effects or calming and blissful effects, by changing the ratios of the antidepressive to anticonvulsant and antipsychotic compounds in there. This is very similar to, as we were referring to before, the different ratios of cannabinoids and terpenes in cannabis, and how even though there's the same compounds in there in different ratios, they have completely different effects.
Well, and it's quite interesting you say that, because just to even simplify it further, Convulsions are basically like what seizures essentially, right? What people find in
Mhm.
epilepsy, like epileptic fits, etc. So this basically has a pharmaceutical application for those people actually, suffering from that sort of like illness or conditions. And you also say that it also has the ability to increase serotonin, which essentially is, or dopamine, which essentially means to increase people's moods, and this could be leading from like dealing with depression, etc., things that affect people. So essentially this touches on the element that if you tune it correctly, people can essentially choose their own moods, per se, and that's what you're saying.
Precisely. That
Nice.
agency to influence both our physical health and our mental health is really close to both Nate and I's heart. That the ability to choose, the agency to be able to influence yourself in that way is often not granted by the circumstances that are imposed upon us wherever we're living. And what's beautiful about Kanna and plants similar to it, and some of the blends that we've come up with in these products, is that we think that it's going to offer an opportunity for wellness to support integrative health that most people probably don't get offered by most products. And again, we're not making any medical claims here whatsoever. It's not within our rights to do so, selling a supplement product, but we are inspired by the potential of these ingredients and the decades of clinical research behind them.
Nice. And sorry, I tend to just write down notes as things are said, and so that I don't forget something when I ask a question. And I know you say that you're not making medical claims, and I just want to emphasize why that's important for some people who might not understand why. Because particularly in when you work with the FDA, or when you work with any regulatory board for your medical device products, there's certain things that you're allowed to claim so that it's not classified as a pharmaceutical drug or a medical device. And there's certain things that you can say this is what it just does. So then it's classified as a sort of like a herbal product, as if you're just getting like your tea or your rooibos tea. It's not really saying that it's gonna cure your cancer, but it will say that it's got maybe antioxidants, and you know that if there's oxygen, it's probably gonna fight cancer. So it's not. It's like, and this is good. This is a good strategy in terms of people who are listening right now who are looking at a new product that they want to bring to market, that essentially we're trying to reduce the number of paperwork, and at the same time also just actually just being honest to say, this is just a herbal product that we have and people are using. Whether you want to use it, it's okay, but it might work for you, it might not work for you, depending on this, but this is what it does to your brain. So yeah, I just wanted to expand a little bit on that so people understand why you say that you're not making any medicinal claims. It's for a reason. It's not just because you guys are lazy or anything like that. So it's yeah. So it's important to get that out of the way. So and then talking about like the mass production, because as part of the research that I was doing leading up to this, the actual plant that was actually being found in Kanna land, what they call it, in that part of South Africa where it grows, because the plant is very sensitive to weather conditions, and etc., humidity and everything. So it's really hard to cultivate outside of those, outside of its natural environment. So, but people have obviously built labs and tried to simulate conditions of that environment, etc. But because the plant was only found in that part of the world, it made mass production quite difficult. And then this leads to the next point, which we're going to be touching on, regarding the new extracts that have started to form, particularly DV17 Kana. I think that's what it's called. The What could you tell us about that?
So, as we were mentioning before, the type of kanna that is cultivated determines the compounds that are in the extract. The kanna that we use is actually sourced from ethically cultivated and vertically integrated operations that have reciprocity built in for the Khoisan people. And in addition to using environmentally friendly cultivation practices that, although they're not organic certified, are as close to organic certification as possible. And in addition, the extraction methods, which are generally just ethanolic extract, solvent, ethanol, soaking, filtering, and then spraying on a sugar matrix, like some sort of dextrose. That's both the I believe the commercial extract for Zembrin and these other operations that are coming up what they're using. What's essential though in any Kanna extraction operation again is the control over the cultivation, ensuring that it's not harming the environment, and the control over the lab testing at the end, ensuring that the compounds that you believe are in the extract are in there and in the ratios that you want them to be to get the effect that is necessary. There's a lot of different Kanna out there in the world. A lot of it for varying prices from different vendors, and the difficulty is assuring quality and safety. And what we lay our hats on is the reciprocity, the safety, the environmental consideration, and the lab testing with the vendors that we use for Kanna, which ensure on multiple levels that the people using the Kanna are safe, that we know what is in it, and that the environment and the cultures that support this plant coming to the world aren't being harmed by the commercialization of it.
Well, that's nice to hear that there's something in for the San people because as I said, like the San people generally live in quite remote places in South Africa. They've sort of maintained their culture, they've maintained their way of life. And for anyone who wants to visit this part of the world, I recommend you to, visit the Kalahari Desert, the Namib Desert. That's where potentially they will be, and you get if you get to go and see on how they live, how they're able to use a very sort of like a minimalistic approach to life. They use everything is quite communal. I like how the culture is the way of the culture is kind of set up. It's quite nice, and even how they do the hunting and. How they kind of grateful to the environment before they eat. I think they just give thanks to the animal. It's quite nice. It's quite a nice a way to see life, especially nowadays when people are turning vegan for all kinds of ethical reasons behind animals being killed, and how they've maintained their diet shows the respect, which I think which will even please people who are vegans or vegetarians now. But nonetheless, coming back to what you're talking about regarding like how you guys are helping these people. I was actually going to speak on this point later on because I think it's quite essential to have like a good business model that looks after people as well. So then this it just brings me to the question um, regarding the extras that you spoke about, which I wanted to also talk about here because I spent some time reading about this and I'm quite excited to be able to share my what I've learned and also to learn new things. But one thing that I learned is that even when they do the extractions in the labs, the most difficult thing for most companies is for them to, because out of the out of the three alkaloids we spoke about today, which maybe people use as markers, the mes membrane, like the people struggle to keep them stable after they've been extracted, even though it's quite easy. So I know it's probably quite confidential information for you guys, but would you say like you got a way that you're working around keeping the alkaloids in the extras stable long enough afterwards, so people can actually have the right dosage and everything together combined?
Absolutely. The shelf stability starts with the Kanna extract manufacturer. The third party laboratory testing and their shelf stability, along with the reciprocity built into their model, and the vertical integration of their cultivation, give us a lot of assurance. In addition, the way that we package the Kanna individually in doses ensures that the dose is not exposed to air or to light or anything that might provide any sort of oxidative or damaging force. The difficulty, I think, with a lot of Kanna products is that they come in a tincture or in a liquid form. And anything in chemistry that's dissolved in a solvent is going to be more open to damage oxidatively, or via exposure to light, than something that's kept neat in a powder form and packaged away from light and heat. Long-term degradation studies on the our particular product have not been performed, but I have immense confidence that the way that it's packaged and the ingredients that are sourced to use it will ensure its long-term shelf stability.
Nice, nice. That's really nice, and that's quite assuring because I think most people, just like any consumer, You want to know that if you buy your product, it's gonna have the dosage. By the time you get home, you don't want something with like a half life of like maybe half an hour or something, because that's like how some other, like, when you start looking at nuclear medicine and everything like that, how that's how short some life form can be. So that's quite reassuring, and it's quite good knowing that there's a sort of like a standard. So has there been an industrial standard, sort of like a industry standard that everyone has to meet, that you guys are adhering to, or it's still a new product? Because I understand right now, even though it's been around for like centuries, it's still new essentially to the West. Essentially, that's what you guys are doing. You introducing Kanna to the West. So do you have like a standard, sort of like benchmark for the industry at the moment, something similar to the FDA, but maybe on a smaller scale?
Sure. The benchmarks that we're setting personally are both food safe and what we've seen respected in other similar industries, like the global psychedelic industry and the medical cannabis industry and the recreational cannabis industry here in the United States and beyond. Those standards are both, food safe and reminiscent of pharmaceutical quality standards, but since they're not regulated by the FDA, are not strictly falling under their purview. They're as close as possible, and that's what we're upholding. Once again, with the huge selection of Kanna products on the market trying to be introduced into the West, uh, the stability and the long-term viability of these products, the safety of these products is of utmost importance. And designing this product from the ground up for safety and for benefit, maximal benefit, was our MO.
Nice, nice. And
And
yeah, sorry, speak, Nate.
I
Of
was going to say,
course.
I believe to your point, Rodney, that like
Yes.
this is just a new industry, or a very new, at least perceptually to much of the Western world. This is just something that is novel, and so there hasn't quite been that time for those industry standards to be collectively developed. And so that's part of kind of like I think what we're all going to be collectively working towards, folks that are within that health wellness, specifically with Kanna. Um, and kind of like what you mentioned about the degradation. That's, I believe, part of the advantage of working with extracts, and like the dry, powdered version of the alkaloids. Whereas like working with a natural material, right? Like there's just natural variation in the alkaloids, the concentration, the ratios, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That's just you get that fluctuation in effect, and that variability there. Whereas with the concentrated alkaloids, we just have consistency in those alkaloids, and we can have a relatively consistent effect there.
Nice, nice. No, that's really assuring. And talking about different grades and stuff, because as part of the reading leading up to this, it turns out there's like three. Essentially, there's like three grades. There's like the pharmaceutical grade, which is at the very top, and this like grown in labs, controlled environments, sealed off, like all the lab conditions. And there's like the nutraceutical grade, which is like in the middle, and then there's like the what they call the table grade, which is also then just like grown outside, in sort of like per hectare, essentially. Um, and this is quite important to differentiate between these two, because up leading up and up, oh, sorry, I lost my tongue there, leading up until now, we've basically spoke of the pharmaceutical aspects of Kanna, but there's also like the recreational aspect of Kanna as well, which I'm keen to start talking about now as well, because it's like interesting. It's similar to cannabis, essentially, where also there's people who use it for medicinal purposes, and I think the cannabis for medicinal purposes is a lot stronger. You have to get it through your doctor; it's kind of controlled, and then there's then it goes all the way to the cannabis people can just get off the streets, essentially, which has now been seeing a wave of like massive legalization throughout the world. Similar to Kana, even though Kana is a different sort of like a herb, essentially, like entirely, when you look at the way it binds in your brain, how it affects you and everything. um like, are you guys also looking to cater for the recreational aspect, or are you simply focused on the pharmaceutical aspect of it?
At this time, we have not yet developed anything specifically for the recreational aspect.
Makes sense.
That being said, that is something we are interested in, and also developing uh, different formulations that can be applied in different ways. And so, to start with, we wanted something that was as functional as possible was like you can get up, go to work, take this, and you get the benefits of the energy and focus. As you know, we're often looking to caffeine or coffee for that. It's kind of the cool. What people most frequently go to. And in this case, we thought a really nice addition to that would be the effect of Kanna, which, although subtle, tends to put people in a little bit better of a mood, give them a little bit more patience when dealing with others, right? A bit more heart-centered, if you will. And then that can also be applied in a lot of different ways. So, like I said, initially we were looking to focus for like day-to-day use, going to work kind of consumption, and like how can we bring that more gentle, more kind, more patient side of ourselves into our day-to-day interactions. One of the next things we're going to be looking at is a formulation specifically for like a romantic connection, right? So like how can we bring that, which will likely be a little bit stronger of a dose, in conjunction with other herbs or components that are beneficial in like a more intimate setting. And then, like you said, yes, the recreational component is something that as we go along, we're definitely interested in exploring, and especially with Kanna, because it can, subjectively speaking, create effects that are reminiscent of other compounds used for recreational purposes, but without an intoxicating component, which is interesting. Where there is the feel good, I'm in a good mood, kind of buzzy experience with a very level-headed, and I'm also extremely sober and completely coherent kind of balance to it.
Nice.
Yeah, with the emphasis that we're placing on launch, as Nate said, the focus is not recreational use, but I always ask the question, if someone consumes a glass of wine recreationally, does it have the same medicinal benefits? Right? It's what it boils down to is the quality of what's in the product, the lifestyle and the behaviors around how it's used, which define whether or not it's conventionally recreational or medical. I would posit that it is possible to integrate medical use in a recreational setting and enjoy medical benefits. And if there's something I'm really inspired about, and so is Nate, is the work of the Zendo project, and this idea that support for altered state experiences doesn't have to be limited to a clinical environment, that people can have breakthrough experiences and deep realizations, beautiful connections with people out in the world, or even at a social setting, at a music festival, at a conference, and it doesn't have to be within the confines of a doctor's office. And this experience, the Kanna product that we formulated, is an attempt at liberating the confines of those types of experiences and making them approachable and sustainable for the everyday.
Nice. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what you guys are referring to right now is what's called micro dosing, essentially, where you can take it in small amounts on a day-to-day basis and go to work. And I think that's actually quite good in terms of long-term use, because otherwise people would have had to take maybe some antidepressants, something, or maybe it's like similar to drinking coffee every day when you get into the office. Essentially, it's like a small dose of something that you can take every day without huge detrimental effects or side effects to your health. And this is quite interesting because when I was researching, I found out you can take it in all kinds of ways. Other people put it under their tongue, or just eat it as well. Apparently, there's potential ways to eat it. But how would you say is the way people should take, kind of, from what you've seen? Is there one size fit all, or is it like one specific method? What's your take on that?
Well, for us personally, drinking the extract of Kanna is the most gentle, approachable, and easily tunable way to reach the level of psychoactivity that you desire without over-consuming, in my opinion. There are other Kanna vendors that will, tongue-in-cheek talk about, insufflating, like literally snorting stuff. There are people who talk about chewing plant extract or fermented material, but the most approachable, gentle, and easiest way to dose for us is in a drink. And we'd also like to emphasize, too, that although Kanna is an extraordinary plant, we feel that we have accompanied it with additional ingredients that help to enhance both its psychoactivity and its medicinal benefit. Although, again, we're not making any claims. In particular, Kanna doesn't naturally affect dopamine. So the effect of Kanna can actually be quite calming and almost sedative for some people. The combination of Kanna with guarana and velvet bean, two sources of natural antioxidants, polyphenols, in the case of guarana, theobromine and caffeine, and in the case of velvet bean, L-dopa, a precursor to dopamine, really rounds out the experience of Kanna, adding that element of both motivation, stimulation, and focus. We have different blends that are also caffeine-free for people that are trying to get away from caffeine. But the beautiful cooperation between Kanna with caffeine is thus. Kanna blocks stress release. It stops the biosynthesis of cortisol in our body. And when we look at why coffee and caffeine are bad for us, it's actually because excess consumption drains magnesium out of the body and causes the production of cortisol, which stresses us out. Not only does the blend of Kanna that we're providing have Kanna in it and block that cortisol, but it has magnesium to counteract the magnesium loss from the caffeine. And the combo of Kanna and caffeine together will ensure that we're not motivated by stress. We're motivated by embodiment and peace.
Well, well, that's quite impressive. I'm it's like mouth watering. Just to simplify what you've said, is basically saying cortisol is a stress hormone, essentially. Every time you stress, you release cortisol in your body, and coffee adds up to that, and you lose magnesium. Magnesium is important in your body because magnesium is also one of the important electrolytes we have in our body. So it's like it's nice because the world or the body is like one holistic system, and we have to work with everything, like as I said at the beginning, and that's what you're doing. So what makes kind of quite interesting as well from what I'm seeing is different companies can have different compounds essentially. So they can have the Kanna and they can add other ingredients to it, and this to sort of like counterbalance what people are using conventionally, such as like caffeine to go to work. And there's a lot of people who can't go to work without it. So it's like essentially they're hooked to it. And this is like an alternative way to say, you know what, it's a much healthier way to go. And then it kind of leads me to like just the curiosity, because when I was doing the research, because it's new, people are still trying to figure out what's the best way to take it. If you're microdosing, like, is it better to take a day, be like a day break in between, take it every other day, or is it better to just take it daily? But do you think, like, looking now at the sort of like the tolerance the body builds up, like, can the body build up a tolerance to kind of where people might feel like, okay, they need a stronger and stronger dose each time to basically get the same feeling they had before as other drugs? And I think that's what concerns a lot of people right now, to say, you know what, okay, maybe if one cup of coffee doesn't do it for me, now I need three in the morning, because they've built up tolerance over years. What would you say for Kanna? Does Kanna have that capacity for tolerance build up in the body?
The pharmacology of Kanna is really interesting. I will definitely say that. The deeper that you dive into the literature, the more you hear this reference of reverse tolerance being used in reference to Kanna. The interesting thing about Kanna is it seems that the more often you use it, the less of it that you need to feel the effects. It's not that, hypersensitivity to Kanna will always move in one direction over time. It does depend on frequency of use, but personally, in my own use of Kanna and in others that my loved ones that I've shared with, the need to use it more lessens the more that you use it. The effect, the level of which you can achieve, is achievable with less and less the more that you use it. We designed these pouches of drink mixtures such that they can be shared with a friend and still be perceivable, or you can dedicate a whole one to yourself and kind of step into an experience. The interesting thing as well, as far as the safety profile goes, is the acceptable daily intake for Kanna extract is upwards of 420 milligrams, and a lot of these individual servings are anywhere between 30 to 50 milligrams. So not only is it safe to take larger amounts of Kanna extract. Not that I'm recommending that, but there's also this reverse tolerance effect that makes sure that you don't really need to take multiple in order to achieve the experience that you want. Overall, I believe, personally, and this is, maybe my impression of reading the medical literature, and again, I'm not a medical physician, but it seems to me that the antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potential of Kanna creates a state of wellness that allows for the feeling of wellness to be easier to access the more often you use it.
It's interesting then, like going to like my next question, which was I think everyone's waiting to hear, like, is there any sort of like side effects? I know obviously you say that the pouches you have, the daily recommended is like what, 420 milligrams, but you're serving essentially 30 milligrams. So essentially doing the math, you'd have to take at least 14 or 15 to basically get to your daily limits. And I don't think anyone is going to be drinking that much of it. But like, what are the the side effects? Are there any side effects that happen with kind of like some people that I as I was doing research, they said sometimes they've combined kind of with like MDMA, which is also another psychedelic essentially. And sometimes when then they get this sort of like on the way down, when they have this sort of like not so positive experiences, but that's with in combination with another essentially with another drug essentially. But looking at Kanna by itself, like, what are the side effects, and is there any chances of addiction?
Side effects of Kanna, if as far as timing goes, if although Kanna is safe to take every day, taking it every day is not something that I personally advise. I have a schedule where I actually take it every other day, and I balance that with other supplements, and that ensures essentially that we're not pressing that same button, serotonin button, every single day. Although there's a reverse tolerance effect with Kanna, and unlike conventional SSRIs or SNRIs, you're not going to have to keep increasing the dose or wait weeks to see effects. The thing is, anything that you take every day, depending on the dosage, can become a stressor on the body. And the idea of balance, of microdosing, there are other Kanna vendors that say, hey, take our product 5 days a week and then, take 2 days off. It's really up to the individual on how they relate to the product. The side effects of Kanna consumption, in addition with other things that affect serotonin, as you said, like MDMA or SSRIs or SNRIs, although it's not entirely clear whether or not that is a threat, there are some people that say, that the combination isn't dangerous. I'm of the school of thought that you should not be taking anything that affects serotonin at the same time as something else that affects serotonin, especially if the journey in wellness and, self-medicating is about wellness. I'm not poo-pooing anyone who is trying to stretch the limits of their consciousness, but that is not, in my opinion, the purpose of Kanna or the purpose of this product. The interesting thing, though, and this has been referenced in other podcasts, the Psychedelics Today, for instance, but the habit of taking SSRIs the day after a psychedelic experience has become a trend in individuals who are looking to lessen that dip of on the second day. As you said, you may take a psychedelic like MDMA and then the day afterwards feel depleted. This is actually a time where once the psychedelic is out of your body and there's no interaction, taking Kanna for integration would actually be an excellent opportunity, both to feel relief from that sort of deficit of serotonin and to feel that calm, that presence. If there was anything that came up during the psychedelic experience that was activating or stressful, Kanna can help alleviate that stress and integrate the psychological and emotional aspects of that experience as you enter back into what some would call like default life.
Nice. It's quite reassuring to hear that, because essentially what you're saying is the body is a machine that you also have to look after. You have to look after yourself. You don't want to overdo anything, like you wouldn't, like basically too much of anything is a poison. Like even the water we're drinking right now on this podcast. If we decided to just sit down and bench drink water, we could also get poisoning from that. But people don't even realize that. But it's nice. It's nice to hear that, and it's quite assuring. But I'm quite confident to think that, as time goes on and as it becomes more mainstream, it's gonna be more revealing to people, like if it's actually a good product, or not. Because I feel like there's nothing that beats like the sort of like the clinical evidence you see. So if people eat like coffee or things like that, and we see what we use it for and how we choose when to take it in our lives, and that's basically what you're saying. And like just sort of like looking at the time and trying to round off a few questions, but I got a few interesting ideas that, well, not ideas, but things that came to my mind as to, like, what's your take as to why Kanna is only becoming famous now? Like, what exactly has happened, in like in the history of things? Because I know psychedelics only really started when, like, I think, well, LSD was invented 1938, and it's for like sort of like 90 years on now, or 85 years on since the invention of LSD. We now hear, but what only popularized it was the 1960s. I think the golden era of, like, the hippies, the Beatles, etc. But then there's been an evolution, right? And people have started looking for much cleaner ways and stuff. And do you think that's the reason why Kana is only popping up like now, instead of why didn't it pop up 100 years ago?
It's hard to say, honestly. I think there's a lot of factors at play, and without disparaging, because as a medicinal chemist, I have deep respect for the innovations, medically and pharmaceutically, that come about and save lives. But if I had to venture a guess, I would say it's because it's very difficult to leverage and patent the value of natural compounds. When the reason why, at least in the United States, besides systemic prejudice and racism, there wasn't more emphasis on the potential of cannabis medicine, was precisely because patenting a natural product is a very difficult pursuit in a system that is designed to create new compounds to the tune of $10 billion and 10 years of clinical research over 3 trials, and then sell those compounds in perpetuity. The idea of being able to have a system which can responsibly and ethically cultivate medicinal plants and leverage that for well-being is a foreign concept to a system that relies upon patentable innovations for medical progress. And once again, I am not disparaging or reducing the need for these innovations. Pharmaceuticals like the chemotherapeutic agents, which a large amount of them are based on natural products, which were used during my chemotherapy, saved my life with my bone marrow transplant. However, when I look at what's going on in the psychedelic industry, when I see that, like, an individual person getting MDMA-assisted psychotherapy might have to spend $30,000 over the course of 8 months. When I see that, the mushrooms that grow wild out of the ground might be leveraged in facilities that charge $5,000 to $10,000 a person, I begin to understand that the democratization, the liberation cognitively for people to access this healing might not occur through these systems that are reliant upon patenting and leveraging and limiting these innovations for the few that can afford them. Once again, I am inspired by the potential FDA approval of MDMA and psilocybin, but I don't believe that it will ultimately be enough to reach everyone who could benefit from this movement.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah, Nate.
I was going to say, in addition to that, I feel that in the Western world, when it comes to health, we often have an approach of like fixing the bad rather than like optimizing what's good. And in that sense, right, like, Wayne talking about his chemotherapy, right, like not to diminish the benefits of some of the more modern, like medical industry, right? Like myself, I broke my leg pretty badly, a couple of years ago, and had a metal plate in there that came out a few months ago, right? Like I don't know if there's a tincture that I can take, that can replace like having somebody just screw a bunch of metal into my leg. But I do feel that say like that's approaching it from the physical perspective, and even from the mental perspective, right? If we're talking about psychedelics and how people are using those for not just psychedelics as well, but also empathogens, which just to define that really quick, if anybody's unfamiliar with the term, is a compound that is induces experiences of empathy, of sense of belonging, of like oneness and connection with other people. Increase in sociability, desire to bond, desire to get to know people better, all those kinds of things. And people are using compounds like that, which MDMA would fall under, in order to approach mental health. And those experiences can be very powerful and beneficial. On a day-to-day basis, they're not really sustainable. And so if somebody is looking for like that kind of intensity of experience, which I feel in the Western world there's that seek for just that hit you in the face kind of intensity. Like, if I take this, I need to feel something. I need to know in 30 minutes, like, it's working, right?
Yeah.
And Kanna is much more subtle, and it's kind of like, while it does have those empathogenic effects, is much more of a day-to-day version of that. And I think that's just a relatively new concept for many of us in the Western world, is approaching health from this perspective of like, not how do I take the magic pill that makes all my pain go away, but the equivalent of like, how do I go to the gym on a day-to-day basis, in terms of like not just the actual like physical exercise, but how do I eat in a way that builds my body? How do I, supplement in a way that builds my body? How do I, integrate practices that help develop my mind and emotional state? And those things are, they're practices, and they are regular exercises that we do, or supplements that we take, or whatever it is that contribute to that overall well-being. That is a bit contradictory to our perspective of like, just take a pill to make the pain go away and put the Band-Aid on it.
True, and I really agree with you. I really agree with the idea that it's not good, as you said, when to just try to commercialize everything, and Nate, as you said, it's not good to try to just, as you said, put a bandage over a bullet hole when actually you have to take out the problems. You have to fix the problems, the underlying root cause of the issue, and to do that, sometimes you have to take a step back and look at other things, and not sort of not rush for this like instant gratification of saying I have to feel it right now, but working on something over long term. And I think that'll be better for things like depression and stuff like that. But like Nate, I just want to hear your thoughts, like to say, what do you think is the future now for Kanna? Because obviously it's gotten really popular over the last 10 years, or especially over the last 5 years. And I personally didn't know much about it until I heard about you guys. So where's the future going for Kanna in terms of what would you think? And it's an open question. You can answer it in whichever way you'd like to.
Yeah. I mean, considering that this is purely speculative, what I believe and what I honestly hope is that more and more people adopt this and provide education around it as well, which is a big part of what we're focusing on. And what I mean by that is incorporating part of the daily practice, whether that be the meditation or interacting with other people, or interacting with your family partner. Similar to other empathogens, where somebody can take a substance, right? And maybe you have a cool experience with that. Maybe it's a good time, maybe it's not, whatever it is. There's an experience there. And that's great. But even with those more powerful substances, to get the most value out of them requires education and support around that experience. And so Kanna is a more subtle version of that. And so where I think it's going to go is there's going to be an increase in the education around it. There's going to be more exploration with it and how it synergizes with other compounds, which is, as we've been finding, something is it's a really nice, both experientially and from a health perspective. I believe it's going to be introduced more and more as a supplement for antioxidant effects, anti-inflammatory, its own benefits, and then we're just going to collectively find what other compounds it pairs with that really enhance those benefits.
Nice. I'm happy to hear that. Sounds exciting. So, no, and I think the question everyone has who's been listening to this podcast this far, like, when can we expect your guys' products on the market? Because obviously, like, you guys seem to know what you're doing, with the magnesium stuff in this particular, and this makes your compound unique to the rest of the markets, I guess, or are there other competitors there who have similar, compounds to you guys, but or you guys are trying to create a particularly unique product, and when is it going to be on the market for people to be able to buy?
We believe that we've created an incredibly unique product. There's in addition to the ingredients we mentioned before, the Kanna, guarana, the velvet bean, there's also monk fruit, a full host of B vitamins in there, a special form of B6 and NAD+. There's things to increase cellular energy, longevity, cognitive function, nootropics. It's a blend that we feel is representative of the whole picture, not just focusing on the psychoactivity, but what does your body and your brain need to feel and operate at its best? And how can we integrate the practices, as Nate said, along with the use of a psychoactive that will sustainably affect someone's health, well-being, and their connection to the world and themselves?
Nice.
And as far as where to get it,
yeah, we'll send you the website, which there's going to be a little bit of tech work going on that end, so I'll send you the link for that.
Thank you.
And then this is.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I'll be putting all those links below, guys. I'll be putting Nate and Wayne's like LinkedIn links, the website as well for Disruptor Labs, their company, below if you want to reach out to them. And also the articles that I've also come across doing my research and everything about Kanna, I will also be putting them in the description below. But yeah, Nate, I know you wanted to say something quickly, so I'll let you say.
Oh yeah, just saying that this is we've just been doing our initial manufacturing at scale. So whereas before, we were just like making everything by hand, but we're now able to produce it a bit larger volume. So within the past couple of days, we're now able to accept orders. And yeah, we're just excited. There's a lot of stuff out there on the market, and
Nice.
There's like folks who are making their own cool combinations, and we just have our own, and we think it's personally we just think it's the best one out there that we've seen so far.
Nice. And I definitely, after having this conversation with both of you, I think there's quite a lot of ethical and moral considerations that you have taken in place, and deliberately trying to create something that's actually going to try and improve people's lives, whether it's making them feel better in the long term and everything. So I'm, even though I've never tried, I've never tried anything of this, but I think this is going to be a good product, and I know that it's going to be improving lives for people, particularly those as you said, who needed the most, suffering from epilepsy, maybe a bit of depression, to allow them to be able to choose that good mood factor on a long term basis with not the same side effects as those stronger drugs that are out there. So I'm definitely happy to have learned that today, and I learned a lot of things. I also wrote down a few things here, but and I always ask everyone that comes on the podcast this, and I'll probably ask you, Nate, first. But like, what would be your sort of like advice to people listening right now who are probably looking to enter this space? Like what advice would you give those people in terms of what you've experienced so far? Because I'm sure you've learned a lot along your way.
Hmm. So when you say advice to folks that are looking to enter this space, can you clarify that for me?
So looking to enter the space of like trying to create essentially like a product, or even just trying to start a company where you are working on a herbal product that can have medicinal properties to it. Like what considerations would you give them? Do they have to make sure that they look deeper into the extracts manufacturers? Do they have to, what ethical considerations do they have to make? What, all those kind of small things, those nitty gritties that you see along the way, but you never see them written in any book or any newspaper article. Something like something that you tell your son, like at home, but you never be, it's like a rule that you don't see somewhere else. So that's what I mean essentially by that question.
Okay, yeah, I can. So this is the advice that I've gotten in the past that I have found most useful, and that is just like whenever it comes to like developing something or the branding or like all this extra work that goes into it, right? And as I'm sure you're aware, like with building any sort of business or practice, there's 101 different things you can always be doing and be optimizing and preparing for. But the best advice that I found is that if you're ever developing a product or providing a service, is that at the end of the day, there is a person at the end of that product or at the end of that service, and just identifying like what is it that person would need or would benefit from, and just coming back to that question over and over is what I found to be most useful.
Nice, nice. That's deep. That's deep, and I'm sure that's really good to hear as well. Because some people sometimes you can lose focus of why you started in the first place, and that's good. And yeah, lastly, Wayne, also give you a chance to put in your 2 cents or your 5 cents in there. To what would you like to say out to the audience?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, when it comes to, I'll speak, more to the formulation side. I I just want to emphasize safety and quality to anyone who's attempting to make a product. There's in the supplement space, especially, a lot of ambiguity and questions on whether or not what you're receiving is what you're receiving. And I personally take a lot of solace in the fact that all of the suppliers for all of our ingredients are CGMP, FDA inspected facilities with third party lab testing. The supplement industry is not regulated by the FDA. We cannot make any medical claims, but I believe as a chemist, we have a responsibility, if you're going to be providing a product to people, that there's safety and perspective on the ingredients in those products before people are consuming them and wanting to affect their health or their cognition. Especially as a survivor, I feel that Nate and I are trying to offer the world a chance to access accessible healing, something that's sustainable. And anybody who's attempting to do that, their first factor needs to be quality. Their first concern needs to be quality and safety.
Well, and that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that's really good to hear that. And yeah, so these guys are from Disruptor Labs, and that was today's episode, really, on this podcast to try to shed some light on the or sort of like pharmaceutical ingredients, even though there's a supplement, not an actual medicinal drug. I thought it would be really cool to have them on, and this is the first episode that I've done on anything that's not like technology driven. So I'm really honored to have had you guys for this. And I know I promised the audience one of these episodes for a very long time, and I'm already 30 plus episodes in, and it didn't come. So I'm happy you guys came today. So we'll start to touch on more, supplements, more pharmaceutical drugs, and even cosmetic procedures, that are trendy, such as teeth whitening, hair transplants, etc. So that's still to come on the podcast. So thank you very much, Nate and Wayne, for the time you've given. I know it's still in the morning there, it's in the evening here, to be on the podcast, and I'm really grateful to have had you guys.
And likewise, thank you so much, Rodney. We are honored that you were willing to host us, and it's a delight to get to chat with you and get to share a little bit of our world. It's an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's such a pleasure. Thank you, Rodney.